welcome to the third episode of the Hali Hewa Podcast, where we're platforming the project Voices for Just Climate Action, which has brought together a number of organizations who are implementing climate action at grassroots level. And today I am joined by a very wonderful guest as well, Edwin from Youth and Urbanism, who will tell us more about climate actions in his community. Welcome.
Thank you.
So please introduce yourself, tell us your name and what you do.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I think it's good to always have these conversations. My name is Edwin Odhiambo.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm asked to introduce myself, I always wonder what should I say. But I'm an urban planner and environmental manager by profession. And we run an organization by the name Youth and Urbanism. Urbanism to mean ways of life in urban centers, and we're having youths at the center of this to see how do we plan, build and manage our cities in ways that are safe for children and also provide that environment that allows youth to develop. We wake up every day with the mission to shape urbanism for children and young people. Yes.
Amazing. So you've talked about the urban setup, and when we talk about climate action at grassroots, we always think about a rural setup, and this is quite a unique niche, and of course there's a number of challenges that have been presented owing to the climate crisis. So what really inspired you to sort of focus on, urbanism, and I'm imagining it stems from where you come from?
Yeah. I was born and brought up in Mathare, an informal settlements, and we have these problems that you always face when you're a child, but because you don't understand them, you think it's just a way of life. That's how people live. I mean, if you were to miss water for some days, you think it's normal. That's how people are. Like, if you're not able to get all your meals, and everyone around there is not getting there. So a lot of challenges that the community were grappling with are things that we took to be normal. But now getting into academia, university learning, urban planning, then you start having those insights that, okay, so this is not the way people should live. This is intrigued by something else, lack of planning or lack of good governance or something like that. And so some of those problems became more open to me by then. And I think I started the initiative while still at the university, because now I could relate what I'm learning in class and what was like happening in real life. I remember by then I just got a group of friends that had the same ambition and vision to like start something for the community. And we got into this journey of how do we do something for our young people within informal settlements based on what we have learned.
Yeah. And what has that experience been like for you? Like what are the challenges that you particularly experienced that now prompted you to say, I want to change the situation within my community? Like what does that look like for people who maybe don't know?
Yeah, we always give this good example. A friend of mine once told people in a meeting, and this is one person that I was really looking up to while at primary school. He was like number one, and for us we were like, saa zingine unaingia number 2, then you come back to number 4, unachapwa, something like that. But he was like consistently performing so well, and I was like, this friend of mine really loves school. Then he stands up into this conference and say that what kept him going to school was a food program. Like at least when he came to school, he could get that lunch that angekula, then carry home. And I was like, really? So for me, I thought you have inner drive, you love academia, but for him it was like I was just coming for food. And something like that, if you really look at it deeply, it hits at a different level. I started realizing that maybe something like even coming up with an initiative to help food program could really mean a lot to someone rather than just supporting education.
Yeah. And you say that, and I think about our country right now and how we are constantly fighting for good governance. And I think one of the things that were discontinued was the food programs, which really helped a lot of families, sustain their children in school. And like you said, the example you've given of your friend.
Yeah, I think a lot has changed because this is a community that for a very long time has been marginalized. People refer to them as minority, but I like when people use the word minoritized because it's like intended.
Yeah,
These guys are left behind in decision making. They are not included in economic decisions and things like that. So they face a lot of challenges that are underlying before we even talk about how their environment is or how is climate change affecting them.
Yeah.
And so when we got into running VCA, we were like, okay, now we have an opportunity to address this. These are people that have been left behind, but now we can amplify their voices. And through doing that, for us, amplification really meant three things. The first thing was, how do we tell their story? Because it's like no one was listening or talking about them. And actually, for a big... for a couple of times, people referred to as slum settlements as the more of seen as victims. Some people could even go ahead and accuse them for like being dirty, and they're the ones that are doing harm to the environment. No one saw this population as a solution. And so that is a story we wanted to tell. The second thing, I think it was, we had a lot of local solutions that also no one was recognizing. A lot of young people were doing stuff that could help, but no one was talking about them. People only think if you go to Mau and plant trees in Mau, that's when you're dealing with climate change. But we had local solutions there. And then lastly was like, how do we do participatory governance? How do we bring this community to also participate and engage with their leaders? How do they talk to their local chiefs on this issue? So we said this is now the time to at least push this agenda within these three fronts. And yes, we have seen a lot of improvement since we started.
I like that you've talked about the stereotype. Like, we immediately assume the fact that you maybe live in an informal settlement is you're a victim, but you've painted a different angle where some people are actually happy to be there and are intentional about bringing the community up. And from the experience I've had with you and interacting with you, and even June is her name June from your project, you see how there's so much knowledge that you bring on board. There's so much that you share in terms of local solutions, and even the oneness that comes with people who live in the informal urban settlements. And you can see that these are people who are really passionate about transforming their communities. And so for VCA, paint a picture for us, what the project actually entails, what you're doing, in Mathare, and, just paint a picture so we understand what you actually do.
Yes, so within these three fronts, starting with telling stories, for us it's how do we come up with activities or initiatives that helps us tell that story. So that could mean us having podcasts, us having an online radio where people could do just chats and talk about these things. That could mean having interviews and documentaries and things like that. But this began with a single activity called Mojo. I think that was our first activity in line with that goal, where we were training a number of mobile journalists. We figured that, okay, these people are not able to have cameras and all that, but most of them have a decent, phone. If not decent, but at least a phone that can take a picture and do something. And it was so good because people never knew that they could influence policies by just taking a picture.
Yeah.
And I remember the first picture that really caught our attention is someone taking a picture of a bridge and then tagging the local ward admin, who really got mad. And for us, we were happy that, okay, so the message can...
You're ruffling the feathers.
So, yeah, and we said, and that was even before the project. And I think when we started the project, we actually prioritized that because at least we had a scenario that mobile journalists did, and it helped. And this was not even someone who has done like has a background in media. It was just a community member who took a picture of a bridge that was said to have been repaired, and yet it's not repaired, with a lot of millions from the government.
Yeah.
And so this was our first step. But that has led to so many things. I mean, we have a running podcast right now. We have an online radio that is running, and we did so many documentaries. The latest one being one on floods. I think we will be talking about that, which interesting story. We are planning to screen that very soon. So on the second part on local-led solutions, we were also looking at how do we identify them and then help them, maybe through knowledge, links, and things like that. And currently we have young girls who are using recycling textile to make school bags. And in the beginning of the year, next year, we want to distribute these bags to schools. And I think that will also be supporting children in education, but at the same time helping us recycle textile, which is a very big problem because most of our textile end up in dumping sites, fumes, again, climate change. Lastly is on the one I talked about, participatory governance. How do we bring governments and government agencies into this? And for us, that was so broad. It didn't just mean bringing the Kenyan government, but even the embassies that we have and things like that. And we have made quite a significant step because we have Embassy of Portugal supporting a lot of our initiatives in the community. We have had the MCA who even was willing to open our community park. We developed a community park there, which is an interesting story. Yeah, and so for me, that is what we are doing, and that is what we continue to do.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, the online radio plays very good music. I was listening to it the other day.
We are working on the programs, and this is, I mean, it has been a journey from setting it all up and things like that. Currently, we are working on a mobile app, taking a little bit, quite some time because of the licensing, and I think our communication authority, Kenya, is another story. But yeah, that is coming up soon, and when that is done, then we will fully roll out the programs because we can't do that before the license come in. And
they're all very interesting things that literally inspire change in a community. And you've talked about the mobile journalism, and that is literally policy influence in its simplest form. And of course, no leader wants to be called out for something they didn't do right. And you've talked about, of course, the community park, and we take that for granted, because you imagine just finding a park should be an easy thing to do. But of course, we understand how the situation looks like in most of the informal settlements in Nairobi. And you've talked about some of those challenges that you've experienced, and now there is those challenges that have come because of the climate crisis. And I'll particularly mention the floods this year, and I know that directly impacted you, and I'd really want you to talk about that and share how inspiring the work you did in terms of helping the communities, putting them together, not necessarily resettling them, but offering a temporary solution for them.
Climate-induced disaster continue to be like a very big challenge, and the problem is that it's not ending soon. I think they're getting worse as we continue. Mathare is a valley, and so whenever it rains, that river just gets crazy. And it was even worse recently because some dams on the catchment areas, some of them were just overflowing, and so all that water was coming down to these informal settlements. It really affected us in both within the organization, because a lot of our projects, like the park project that we were having, was also along the river, and so I think it took us a step back, because this was, if we looked at whatever we were going to have, it was going to be like one of the biggest, not actually one of the biggest, it could be the biggest park in an informal settlement in East Africa. Because currently the one that is holding the record is Comp Green.
Yeah, I know Comp Green.
And we were looking at the size, and we were like twice the size of Comp Green.
Oh wow, because I've been there and we planted some trees.
Nice job they've done.
They've done a good job.
Yeah, and so we were like almost twice, actually more than twice the size of Comp Green. And by just like that, we could be like the biggest, and water swept a lot of the grasses we had planted and all that. But that aside, that's our own project. What about the community? I mean, a lot of houses. We lost, within that single night, we lost close to 13 lives.
Wow.
Yeah. Some of them that were not also documented, because that was also another problem. I think our media never did us justice when it came to documentation of what really happened that day. And government later ordered that all those that were living along the riparian land to be evacuated.
Yeah.
We don't support people living in riparian land, but was that really the right time?
The right time.
Yeah, because it added more of like salt into an injury. That became a bigger problem. Up to now, a lot of schools are still struggling because a lot of social amenities were demolished, including the wash programs, the wash facilities that were there in schools. Looking at all this, and we did a documentary of how some schools are still struggling up to date, it gives us a very big question of what should we do to ensure resilience in communities like this.
Yeah, because, you know, for as long as it's not on the news, nobody talks about it anymore. And we're assuming, this thing happened back in April, but now you're saying there are schools, there are people who are still struggling to recover from that. And that brings in the issue of course, climate adaptation and the loss and damage fund that we're even asking for, with the COP happening this year and it being a finance COP. And from what I hear, because I haven't been there, from what I've been following, it doesn't seem that like there's going to be
crazy.
feedback.
The documents are just, no one is giving out the check. Yeah.
No one is giving out the money that we need. And you see, it's not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of we're sure it will happen. And
just when.
Just when. And like you said, there's still communities that are struggling until now to recover from something that happened in April. So it's such a like a never-ending cycle of injustices that continue to be exacerbated by, of course, the climate crisis. And also you part of the project I know that you did was to help some of those communities, using the group of girls that you've been training. So also share that with us.
We have a gender lens when we are implementing Voices for Just Climate Action, where we want young girls and women to be in the front line of these conversations. And when disaster happened, no one had like anticipated that this was going to happen, and so we didn't have time to like mobilize a fresh team and all that. And so we said, okay, we already have a network of girls advocates that are talking about climate change, and they've been doing this for quite some time. Why don't we use this team to mobilize resources and give the immediate response that was needed? That could mean giving out food, clothing, books, because schools were also just about to open. It was crazy because you wonder if your parent will focus on like getting a place to resettle, or like budget for your school budget that is just about to. So we gave out things like that. And that has continued, not only in giving out stuff, but being there with the community, like helping them whenever they're washing, and you could have some soap. We had girls making the soap and distributing it to the community. That was really touching by then. And later, that continued through partners like the embassy for us to continue even supporting schools, yeah, and saying, okay, you guys didn't even have textbooks because they were all washed away. We can buy you guys books and stationaries within these schools. Schools are still learning in tents. School are still learning in tents up to date.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, I think that the groups that we formed through VCA played a central role in developing the youth-led humanitarian response initiative that we had after the disaster.
Yeah, and these are, I was having a conversation with someone the other day and I was telling them, I think, you know, the UNFCCC has a lot to learn from what is happening at grassroots, because I'm like, they're still trying to figure out how, you know, loss and damage finance or finance would actually get to grassroots, and there's always an assumption that they cannot handle money, but I'm like, we have perfect examples of community groups using very little finances to do amazing work and to make sure that they are safe.
And I was looking at even the budget. Do you know when the water catchment areas, there is red soil coming from there, and so when there was flooding, a lot of communities, that red mud got into their clothes and all that, so there was like massive washing that was taking place in the community. We looked at the amount of money we used to buy the ingredients used to make the soap. Very cheap, but the impact it had on community was like massive. And if you're talking about it being expensive and these people not being able to handle this, I'm like, what are you doing?
What are you talking about?
This also was seen when COVID happened. You know, a lot of humanitarian response organizations were not able to handle COVID because it was like widespread. Young people really came out to help communities and older people within our communities to cope with that disaster that was happening. I don't know why they can't learn that youth-led humanitarian response is something, and so we need to like invest in that to allow young people to always be ready to respond to such things whenever they happen.
Yeah. One thing I have loved about what you've talked about is the fact that through some of the initiatives that you decided to start on your own, you found partners who've been willing to support. And that is usually only possible when you have proof of concept and you have things that are actually working. So that goes to say, like you said, young people like have so much power, have abilities to literally transform communities, and we just need people to trust us, because I'm also a young person and obviously I'll be biased to making sure that your story is out there. And so now looking at, you know, some of the experiences you've had, some of the challenges that you've had, the good things that have happened, the partnerships you've been able to build in VCA and outside of VCA, what is your next step? Like, what is, you know, 2025, 2026 looking like for you and at Youth and Urbanism?
I tend to be very optimistic, but before I get into that, one thing that the program has enabled us to do, and that is VCA, is not actually to run a project, but it was like helping us build grounds where we can develop projects from, and that's how I saw it even from the beginning. Like, VCA for us was not a project, it was a program that enabled us build like starting grounds for other projects to come out of it. So if you look at our work towards telling stories in the community, a lot of things have come out of that, from like the online radio and all that. And if you look at the climate agenda and humanitarian response, we now have the youth-led humanitarian response program that is coming up out of that. We had this school clubs that we were running with children in school, and now we have CCDRM that is coming out of that, which is Children Climate Disaster Risk Management, and we are doing this with UNICEF to try and see how do we help children who are already vulnerable or will be vulnerable due to these climate issues. And those are like platforms where other projects could erupt. And moving forward, we are trying to look at what will be the sustainability of this, and we have been really thinking on that, trying to see for everything that has started, based on the groundwork that was provided by VCA, how do they become sustainable? We still don't have answers yet, but that is something that we are looking up to really get into finer details of the same in 2025. Could mean partnerships, could mean collaborations, could mean more lobbying for funding, and even how do we generate our own internal finances to support what we're doing? Because it's like we are losing off with this loss and damage and finance, climate financing and all that. Yeah, so that's one part of it. The second part would be, we want to become a think tank when it comes to issues of urban programs. How do we help even the international organizations who don't really have a grasp of what it really means to run an urban program in a community like an informal settlement? And so we want to be that to go-to person when someone wants to run this program. That will mean we have to do a lot of learning from the programs that we are already having and documenting that so that we can help not only guide our future programs, but even also help other organizations do the same. That will be a good thing for us to become a knowledge hub on urban, youth-led urban programs.
I think you already are. You really already are. But I get what you're saying in terms of actually, of course, being able to stand up on your own. And of course, I like also the idea of trying to locally finance for yourself, because of course the funding landscape keeps changing,
and it's dynamic.
And if you are fully dependent on donor money, sometimes it becomes challenging, and you'll risk maybe stopping some of your projects. So I love that you're thinking about the sustainability aspect of it. You've talked about so many things that of course I'd want to share with the audience in terms of the links for the online radios, for the documentaries, for the whatever that you have. So my question is, what kind of support do you need, for maybe someone who's listening and has been inspired, when you're looking at some of the things you want to do next year, what are those things that you need support on?
Yes, before even I ask for what I would need support on, I think it's also fair that I give gratitudes to the partners that have helped us before. I mean, when I got into VCA, I found an entire community that, and I think by the time I got in, I don't know, because I don't have the data to all the partners, but we were like the only youth-led organization within the entire consortium, which was something, because everyone was speaking and they were all experienced in whatever they have done. And for us, we were coming up with this new lens and new programs that we had not have proof of concept on a few of those things. KIPT on creatives and things like that, they have been amazing. Think Out on communications, those partners have been just amazing. SASWatch, a lot of conversations around organizational structures and all that I think I did with SASWatch Kenya. That was also interesting. And even the alliance partners, WWF really gave us a good support while doing our pack. Because they are really into nature-based solutions and all that. SSN while starting our online radio. So these partners have been so instrumental in our journey. So in terms of support, we mostly think of finances, but it could also mean other supports. And so if a partner is out there and thinks this is among the things that we have mentioned, that this is something we could build on or something like that, then it will be interesting for us to collaborate. It's something that I really believe in. We are a young organization, so just looking for opportunities to learn and work together with people. We have a few areas that we are also looking at moving forward, like the nexus between climate change and care giving. That would mean in bracket gender. So those partners working in that area, that is also an interesting area that we could partner and work together. Our emails and social media platforms, then we can set up a meeting and talk.
Yeah, I'll definitely share your email address and your website if you have one in the social media platforms, so that if anyone wants to reach out to you, they can. So is there anything else you feel you want to talk about that we haven't covered? Or this is sufficient for a first conversation?
Not really. For me, it's at times we speak about all this and we forget to give my main partner Hivos the appreciation for holding our hands and helping us build all this. Because as you can see, most of the things that we have built are built from VCA, and that was like our first project with Hivos. And so, yeah.
Well, Edwin, thank you so much for sharing that with us. You've talked about VCA. It's definitely a network of very passionate people working in different aspects of, conservation, climate action, really passionate about transforming the lives of their communities. And I'll also definitely share, some of the work that we do on the description, so be sure to check that out. But other than that, it was really lovely having a conversation with you, and I know we've not even scratched the surface. There's definitely a lot more to say and a lot more to see. Maybe the next time we'll actually visit you and see the kind of work that you do and be able to show our audience some of the amazing work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great. See you on the next one.